think it would get old, but it doesn't. Hey, what is your biggest dating blunder? What was that experience that maybe scared you off or shook your confidence as you were trying to find a significant other? I remember my first real experience of asking someone out on a date. I was 16 years old. And now I had girlfriends before, in junior high and elementary school and stuff like that, but it was more of the pass the note, do you like me, check box, yes, no, maybe type of girlfriend. But whenever I was 16, this was the first time I ever walked up to another girl. I was in the hall because there was a girl that I had a class with, and we'd talk and we'd joke and that type of thing. And so it seemed like we were kind of flirting with each other. And so walk up to her in the hall and decide I'm going to ask her out on a date. So I'm like, hey, would you want to go watch a movie together sometime? And I remember her eyes widening up, and I'm like, oh, she's getting excited, she's and then she's like, no, sorry. And I'm waiting, she has a conflict that night, and or had other thing go. Just nothing. She's just awkwardly staring at me. I'm like, oh, you just don't want to go out with me because it's me? Okay, all right. And of course, she had 2 or 3 friends who were maybe 5 or 10 feet away. So I didn't time it right either, because they're all standing there trying not to laugh, and it was one of the most embarrassing things that ever happened to me. And so kind of shook my confidence for a little bit. It was a while before I asked somebody out. Anybody else feel like that? Maybe you're just now starting to date, or maybe you've been dating for a while, successfully or unsuccessfully, or maybe some of you, it's not that you're single, but you're single again. You were married and now you're single again, and now you're beginning to have to navigate this whole new world that, you thought you were done with that years ago, and now you get thrust back into this again and trying to figure out there are apparently rules to dating, and nobody told me what the rules are, and how do I figure out, because nobody talks about it overtly. And so that's what we're trying to do in this series. We're doing a series called How to Relationship. And we're talking about all just the different things and pitfalls and problems that can come in our deepest, most important relationships, in marriage and in dating and other types of relationships. And so, we're looking at dating today. There's a particular text I want to look at that hopefully will show in the most God-honoring way how we can go through the process of dating and finding a significant other, and then hopefully determining whether it goes to marriage or not. And so there's a lot of questions that come around this, who do you date? How should you date? How do you know if someone is the right person? Is there such thing as the right person? What about the one? Is there such thing as the one? Is that even in the Bible? Like I said, we're going to be looking at a biblical story that unpacks some of these things. But before we jump into the text, I want to talk just for a little bit about the current state of dating in our society. Did a little research and found that, the world of dating and courtship has shifted and changed a lot over the last 30 to 50 years. That, my parents and my grandparents, just the way dating was for them is very, very different than it is now. And so did a little research, stumbled upon a few studies, gave some interesting facts, and so I want to just share some of those with you so you know what the next generation is having to deal with. So, did you know that the idea of speed dating, does everybody know what speed dating is? It's you're in a room of people, there's a bunch of different tables, and every 5 minutes or so you shift to the table next to you, and you have a quick 5-minute conversation with the person there. And it's basically you get to, essentially it's about quantity, I guess, and not quality, of how many people can I talk to in such a short period of time to see if there's a spark potentially anywhere. But apparently it was invented by a rabbi in Los Angeles in 1999. I didn't realize it had been invented not that long ago. Apparently it's based on a Jewish tradition of chaperoned gatherings of young Jewish adults. Anyway, the University of Pennsylvania studied data from over 10,000 speed daters and found that most people make a decision regarding a person's attraction to the other person within 3 seconds of meeting them. Believe that? Within 3 seconds, you know whether they're a hero or a zero. Another thing, studies show that before a man even speaks a word, the way he stands, whether he's slouching or not, counts for over 80% of a woman's first impression. So, guys in the room who are dating, just I'll give you a little mantra that'll maybe help you out a little bit. Stand up straight if you really want to date. Not good? Just So just remember that. Stand up straight if you really want to date. Other studies show, like if you're, you can't decide what you want to wear on a date, studies have shown that the safe thing to wear is the color blue. Because all these studies show that women are attracted to men in blue for some reason. So, darn, I should have wore blue, Lindsay. Oh, well. Anyway, studies show also that happiness is a contagious thing. And so for potential dates, they find it actually very hard to walk away from someone who's very happy. One of the biggest turnoffs during a date is negativity. So probably don't talk about politics on a date. Go to a very dark place very quickly. In terms of where to go to find a date, studies show that schools, colleges, coffee shops, and malls are excellent places to flirt because people go there knowing and they're open to meeting other people. They know when they go there that they're going to meet other people, and they're usually open to talking to new people they've never met. Poor places to meet other people are restaurants and movie theaters, which makes sense. Like, you don't want some guy hitting on you when your mouth is full, or like, when the Star Wars preview is about to come on. It's like, quiet. No, don't ask. No, I don't want to go out with you. Star Wars is about to come on. That's all that matters right now. Another thing, the worst places to go on a first date. This was really funny. Very random set of places. Worst places to go on a first date include fast food restaurants, your kid's birthday party or school play, your parents' house, strip clubs, X-rated films or swingers parties, a party where your ex will be, window shopping, and church activities. Like, who's doing this study? That is a random assortment of places, and apparently some of these people don't come from, or maybe they do come from similar backgrounds. That's a little disturbing. And then, of course, we have the world of online dating, which actually, interesting thing, first wedding that I ever did here at New Hope was a couple that met online through eHarmony. One of the guy lived up south of the Chicago area. The girl lived somewhere down here in southern Illinois. And they would meet every Sunday here in Effingham to like have lunch and stuff like that. And they would go to New Hope. So for like a year, they attended New Hope fairly frequently, once or twice a month, and then would spend time together. And I ended up doing their wedding, and they actually got married at the chapel at the Cross. Very first wedding ever performed at the chapel in the Cross. So anyway, that was kind of cool. So anyway, eHarmony.com boasts that 236 of its members marry every single day, accounting for about 2% of marriages in the United States. Now, of course, they don't always work out. Approximately 40% of online daters reported that their breakups occurred via email. Started online, ended online. I would guess that the tagline on the email was, "We need to talk." And you're like, uh-oh. And then this is the coup de grace. This is the best statistic of all of them. In the online dating world, women are afraid of meeting a serial killer. Men are afraid of meeting someone fat. Isn't that sad? Guys, we can do better. Seriously, that's sad. We've got our work cut out for us. But like I said, I want to look at a passage in the Bible that maybe gives us a way forward, gives us maybe unintentionally some rules around how we can pursue dating and marriage in a God-honoring way. And I will say this from the get-go, that the story that we're going to look at, when you look at a story from thousands of years ago, there's going to be a little cultural translation, because there's certain things that happen in almost any of the biblical stories that we don't always understand, don't know why they do it, and so those things aren't always necessarily for us. So we need a little bit of discernment, a little bit of leading from God to know, like, okay, what is for us today and what was just for them back then. So you'll see what I mean whenever we get into it. We're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 24 and look at the story of Isaac and how he first meets his soon-to-be wife, Rebekah. Genesis 24, verse 1 starts out. Abraham was now very old, and the Lord had blessed him in every way. He said to the senior servant in his household, the one in charge of all he had, "Put your hand under my thigh." We'll come back to that. "I want you to swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not get a wife for my son from the daughter of the Canaanites, among whom I am living, but will go to my country and my own relatives and get a wife for my son Isaac." Now, multiple things in this story, and I'll start with this, which this was the thing that stood out to me when I first began to read this, was one of the things I noticed was that Isaac is not the one who instigates the process of finding a significant other, of finding a spouse. He's not the one who started. And I did a little bit of research and found that Isaac was actually probably around the age of 40 whenever this happened. Now, of course, in the ancient world, it was a very common thing, arranged marriages, like it still is in some parts of the world. Arranged marriages was a very common thing in the ancient Near East. So his father being kind of beginning this process wasn't as strange of a thing. But what was strange is how old Isaac was when he did it, because typically men are married off at a much earlier age than 40. And so I think there's something significant to that. I think Isaac was not very concerned with finding a significant other. I don't think that was one of the highest priorities in his life, and I think that's instructive for us. And the reason why is because generations later, King Solomon would actually write about this idea and give some very sound advice around the world of dating and marriage. In Song of Songs 8:4, when he writes this, he says, "Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires." See, this meant love and dating is not something that's trivial, not something you rush into, not something that, I have to make it happen as soon as possible, but you enter into it with prayer and with patience, because the truth is there are some of you, maybe in school, that you see your friends beginning to date and you think, am I supposed to be dating? But you don't have any desire. Do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. You will know when you're ready. You'll know when you're ready. You may be in a season of life where, maybe you're just coming out of a divorce, or you're just coming out of a hard situation, and you may even be yearning to be with someone, but you're not yearning to be with someone to live in a healthy, interdependent relationship. You're wanting to use that relationship as an anesthetizing thing, a thing to help you feel, get by rather than get better, that you're almost becoming codependent on that person, hoping that they will somehow fill this need in you that you're not able to fill yourself. And that's not a good reason to be in a relationship. That's not the purpose of the relationship, is that whole idea of but I need someone to complete me. No, you don't. Marriage is not two 50% coming together to make 100%. It's two 100% coming together to make 100%. You are supposed to be whole and full and healthy. You are supposed to give in a relationship, not take from the other person. And so you may not be ready. Do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. So what Solomon is saying here and what we're seeing in this story, and I think this is something we need to realize, the text is warning us, beware taking your relationship cues from culture. Beware taking relationship cues from your culture, because cultures has all different kinds of things to say about relationships. It says, you need to get married fast. If you're not married by the time you're, out of college, then there's something wrong with you. Or if you're not married by 30, you're a failure. If you're still single at 40, there's no hope. And of course, now they're swinging to the other way of no, you don't need to get married at all. Just live with the person. Marriage is an archaic thing. No, you don't need that. Just live with the person. Those types of commitments don't mean anything. But this story shows that God doesn't abide by culture's ways or culture's timetables. In fact, there's actually a phenomenon, if any of you have attended a Christian school, which it may be like this in some secular schools, I'm not for sure, but I attended a private Christian school. And one of the things that I noticed, it was an interesting phenomenon called the ring by spring fever. Anybody ever heard that phrase before, ring by spring? And basically, these people in school are told, hey, you are never going to be around this many other Christians who are of your age and believe the same things that you believe. So if you don't get engaged by the spring semester of your senior year, if you don't put a ring on it, then your chances of finding a significant other who shares your values and stuff drastically goes down the tank. And so you see all these people running around campus freaking out, thinking, if I don't find someone, then, because God can't move once I graduate college, so if I don't find someone in college, then my chances go down the tubes. But what's interesting is I didn't meet Lindsay in college. Actually, the only relationships I had in college, and I was at a Christian school too, were toxic ones. And that had more to do with my own insecurities and immaturity than it had anything to do with the setting itself. It wasn't until probably a year and a half after I graduated that I met Lindsay. And I had actually gotten to the place because of, like I said, toxic relationship I had been in. I was kind of on again, off again with this girl I met at college, and finally it was totally done with it. And I got to the point, I'm like, I'm done chasing after this stuff. Clearly I have no idea what I'm doing, so I'm just going to be done for a while and just focus on my relationship with God, and I'm beginning this internship at a church up in the Chicago area. That's all I need to focus on. Well, guess who was working in the ministry that I was working in? Lindsay. And of course, even for the first few months, I was kind of oblivious to the idea that she was kind of even into me. Everybody else saw it. Nobody said anything, but there was something there, and it finally developed into us dated for almost a year, and then ended up getting engaged. But it took me getting to that place of me surrendering that desire to God, offering it up to Him. And so when God brought Lindsay into my life, it wasn't something I felt like I deserved or demanded, like, God, you owe me this, and I'm just waiting for you to bring it in. No, it's like Lindsay was a gift. She was a grace, because our Father loves to give us good gifts. And the reason why I say this, which this is a super unromantic thing, I'm very aware about what I'm going to say, but it's true, so I'm going to say it. I don't think marriage is guaranteed to everybody. There is nothing in the scriptures that indicate that God has this one person for every single person and everybody's supposed to get married. There are some people that they will go their whole life and be single. They just won't get married. And that's fine. Again, like I said, there's nothing in, I think the reason why it happens for most people, I mean, some of it is just sheer statistics. There's enough people for it to happen, but God is also a Father who loves to give good gifts, and He gives us our heart's desire. But I don't think it's something owed to us. I think it's a gift. Because this idea of the one, God has someone for everybody, that is more a product of Western cultural romanticism than it is the Bible. That's more Romeo and Juliet than it is Isaac and Rebekah. Because see, in the ancient world, most marriages in the world were arranged. You didn't get any say in who you married. And because of low life expectancy and disease and war and things like that, many people remarried more than once. So we can't take our cues from culture that, there's this one person who's going to meet all of my needs and complete me. There is not this one person. Actually, no, I take that back. There is one person, and that one person is Jesus. He's the one. He's the one who's pursuing you. He's the one you're destined to love. He's the one you're destined to marry. And that's why the picture on the final day is the great marriage supper of the Lamb, because He is the one you're supposed to belong to. Anything else is just grace. Anything else is just a gift. Now back to the story. So Abraham sends his servant back to the land of their ancestors to find a wife for his son Isaac. And so he makes his servant swear by putting his hand under his thigh. Can we just admit culturally we've come a long distance? The fact that we're not thigh holding anymore. Everybody gives me a hard time because I'm a hugger, but hey, I'm not making you hold thighs or anything like that. You should consider yourself lucky I don't make you do that. So can we just say we've progressed a ways, thigh holding aside, I think we're in a pretty good place. But he makes his servant swear him an oath saying, promise you won't give him to a woman among the Canaanites. And we'll explain why that is the case in a moment. But verse 9, he continues on. The servant asks him, what if the woman is unwilling to come back with me to this land? Shall I then take your son back to the country you came from? Make sure that you do not take my son back there, Abraham said. The Lord, the God of heaven, who brought me out of my father's household and my native land, and who spoke to me and promised me an oath, saying, to your offspring I will give this land, He will send His angel before you so that you can get a wife for my son from there. Now notice this. If the woman is unwilling to come back with you, then you will be released from this oath of mine. So he's saying, I know this is not a guaranteed thing. But he's like, but I'm trusting that God is going to work this out. I'm believing and I'm asking, and I believe God is going to work this out. But he says, if she's not willing to come back, then you're released from the oath. Only do not take my son back there. So the son put his servant under the thigh of his master, Abraham, and swore an oath to him concerning the matter. Now, again, thigh swearing aside in the story, there's a couple things here that I think are really powerful. And the first one is this: dating and marriage should be pursued in community. Dating and marriage should be pursued in community, because in this story, Abraham didn't come up to Isaac one day and be like, hey, Isaac, you're 40, you're starting to gray a little bit around the temples, go find a wife. Like, good luck, just go do it. Like, Isaac isn't expected to just go off and do it on his own, but there's actually a community who surrounds him, who helps him in this process. Now, to be fair, I feel like culture is kind of put over the millennia throughout civilizations, has kind of put us on different extremes of this principle in the past, because much like in Isaac's time, there are many cultures back then, but even now in some places too, that have, who you marry is entirely an economic thing. There's arranged marriages are still done in parts of the world, so you had very little, if any, say at all. It was a common thing throughout most of human history. Now, though having no say in who you marry might be a bad thing, I honestly think we've gone to the opposite extreme in our modern society to remedy it, and we're experiencing a whole host of other problems now. See, our current way of dating and finding a spouse is that each person is solely responsible, and nobody in your life gets to speak into who you date or marry. The community is totally neglected, and it brings in its own sets of problems, namely the fact that young people trying to find a suitable mate, trying to, find somebody like me as a 16-year-old, as an 18-year-old, as a 21-year-old, I was an idiot. I didn't know what I was doing. I have all these blind spots. I'm being led by my hormones. I'm being led by all these feelings that I have no control over. And so these people I would date, I have rose-colored glasses on whenever I'm dating these people. We're really good at people we like. We kind of shy over their bad traits and only focus on the good. And then, of course, there's people around me who are thinking, why is he dating her? And I'm sure some of you have experienced that before. But in our culture, we feel like nobody can say anything about it. That your family, your friends, your community don't get any kind of input into that relationship, even though we're far too immature, we're far too stupid to be able to figure these things out on our own. Like, I remember I was dating a girl right out of high school. My first year of college was dating a girl. We dated for about a year, and then we were kind of on again, off again for about a year and a half. And just by the end of it, it was just kind of toxic. It was not a good relationship. And I remember when it was all finally kind of said and done, the on again, off again was finally totally off. I remember like commenting to my mom kind of, absent-mindedly, like, yeah, I'm glad that's over. Like, that ended up not being very good. And then she said, yeah, I never really liked her. I was like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, I never really liked her. And I'm like, what do you mean you never really liked her? And she starts naming off all these red flags she saw all along the relationship. And I'm like, Mom, why didn't you say anything? Like, I didn't know you felt that way. I'm like, did Dad feel that way? Like, yeah, he didn't really like her either. I'm like, what? Now, of course, I'm thinking, okay, had they said something, how would I have responded? I don't know. I may have not responded very well, and that's on me. But I remember reflecting on that thinking, man, what a messed up situation that my own parents don't feel like that they get to speak into this, potentially, because I'm not the type of person who just dates to date. I was always with the mindset that it could potentially, not that every date will, but any date could potentially go to marriage, and that's the whole reason I'm doing it. And for them to have major red flags and not feel like they can say anything, like, man, how the community was neglected in that. It made me begin to wonder, which I never asked. I was too scared to wonder what my friends thought of the situation. Like, did they like her? How did they feel about the situation? I was a little too chicken to ask, so I'll never know. But I remember when I brought Lindsay home, because we were like I said, we were both up in the Chicago area. I brought her home to meet my family and to meet my friends and stuff like that. And I remember there was at one point, which I don't know if I ever told you this, like you went to the bathroom. My wife's in here. You went to the bathroom or something, and so I was like, what do you guys think? And they're like, we love her. I'm like, okay, good. All right. Didn't want to make the mistake I made last time. I already messed that up a couple times. I'm like, I wanted to get some feedback and see how that was going to go. And so they loved her. I'm like, okay, involve the community. Community needs to be involved in this. And it was the same way in Isaac's situation. So Abraham's servant set out to his previous homeland to find a wife among Abraham's former people and kin. But notice the first thing he does. I love this in verse 12. This is what it says. Then he prayed. First thing he does in this situation, then he prayed, Lord, God of my master Abraham, make me successful today and show kindness to my master Abraham. See, I am standing beside this spring, and the daughters of the townspeople are coming out to draw water. May it be that when I say to a young woman, please let down your jar that I may have a drink, and she says, drink, and I'll water your camels too. Let her be the one you have chosen for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master. Before he had finished praying, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder. She was the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, who was the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. The woman was very beautiful, a virgin. No man had ever slept with her. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up again. So the first thing we see in this process is offering this up to God, is praying. He sought God for the success of the process. And though it may seem trite, may seem like a cliche to say this, if you are in the dating world right now and you don't have a community surrounding you who are praying, just bathing the situation in prayer, just offering up any potential person, any potential situation, offering that up to God, that God's will would be done, that Christ would be exalted and be glorified in the midst of those dating relationships. Man, you are setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up to not see success in the process. Because when you do, you'll begin to see, even in the midst of it, as you have people pray for you. And it's not just pray that this be the right person, but pray that God give me discernment so I can stop being an idiot. Because the thing is, again, 18 years old, 21 years old, gosh, even for some of us, 40 years old. You're 40 and you're still an idiot. And you need the Spirit of God to speak to you and say, you know what? This guy, he's a hero, not a zero. I see that now. There's other people, total zeros. And I know that now from experience. And I've learned, even through some of my pain, the things to look for and to expect. And so he consecrates his trip with prayer. But what's cool is the servant just didn't go into the land like, okay, I have no idea what to look for, but I'm just going to pray, and okay, so God just brings someone along. We actually see by some of the things he did, he actually had some ideas in mind of the type of person to look for as well. He actually had specific qualities and character traits that he was looking for, though you may have missed them in cultural translation. Abraham lines out actually the first one. He said she needed to be from their family line, from their tribe, from their clan. Now, of course, again, if you don't understand the ancient world and how the Bible works, it's easy to hear things like that, because I've heard accusations say, like, well, that's a racist thing to say. Like, you can't marry someone from a different ethnic group or a different racial group. Like, that's racist that you can't do that. But see, the thing is, marrying within your people group or your racial group in the ancient world had nothing to do with race and almost everything to do with faith, worldview. Because almost every different people group was defined by a different God. So if you married into a different people group, you were embracing another God. You were embracing another religion. And so one of the key stipulations that Abraham wanted for Isaac was, I want you to continue in your worship of the one true God. And I know that my people group, back from where we came from, they worship the one true God. So I know if you marry from among that group, you'll maintain a similar worldview. That's a very, very important thing. And see, Paul actually talks about in the New Testament the importance of this. In 2 Corinthians 6, he actually warns about being unequally yoked. He warns about this idea of being entangled in relationships of those who don't share the same faith. He writes this, 2 Corinthians 6:14. He says, what fellowship does light have with darkness? What harmony is there between Christ and Belial? Belial was a colloquial name for Satan in the ancient world. What does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? What agreement is there between the temple of God and the temple of idols? For we are the temple of the living God. So Paul was really adamant. It is important for you to be yoked equally, meaning that you share the same worldview, you worship the same person, the same God, Because there are some of you here in this room, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because maybe you and your husband or you and your wife, you didn't come from a place of faith. And one of you had a transforming experience with Jesus and your life was changed and the other person didn't. And it caused all sorts of strife and problems in your relationship. Because now suddenly you're focused on two very, very different things. And it puts unnecessary strain in an already difficult, marriage is hard in and of itself. We don't need to add things to it by embracing different worldviews. That's a very key thing to have when looking for someone, is that they have the same type of worldview as you. So that's the first desired trait, is common faith. The other is outlined in this strangely specific prayer that Isaac prays. Because he's gonna wait to see who the first woman is who would not only draw water for him, but offer to draw water for his camels. Now, it's not that he was setting up some sort of impossible circumstance, like who's randomly going to say this exact thing, but rather, I think he was looking for the quality of servanthood. Because see, in the ancient world, to water camels, they really could put the water away, so it was a very involved task. So to not only offer water to a stranger, but then to offer to water their camels, which would be a very long, painstaking thing, was to show servanthood, saying that I don't just think about myself, that I'm willing to not only put other people in front of me, but I'm willing to put strangers, people I don't even know, in front of me. Essentially, love your neighbor as yourself. And he's saying, I want that type of quality in Isaac's future spouse, is that she would be a servant. And I sometimes wonder, and this is speculation on my part, I don't know this for sure, the thought occurred to me because of how this whole story ends, and you'll see it in a moment, what I mean. I wonder if some of these traits came about because of what Isaac and Abraham and all of them saw in Sarah, Isaac's mom. Because if you look at the timing of this story, Abraham decides to start looking for a wife for Isaac right after Sarah, his wife, dies. And so you got to wonder, maybe Abraham, he's, of course, someone you love passes away, you're thinking about them and thinking about their life and who they were. And you can imagine him thinking, man, time is short. I want Isaac to have what I had in Sarah. And so we need to start looking for a wife from him. And I want her to have the qualities that my wife had. And I can guarantee Isaac probably wanted her to have some of those qualities too. Because there's a lot of psychological stuff, and I'm not a trained psychologist, so I don't know all the ins and outs of it. But it's a commonly talked about, known thing that consciously and unconsciously, women will look for traits in a spouse or a significant other that they see in their father, things they like about their father, and sometimes that can go to a dark place too if they had a bad experience with their father. But same thing with guys, that oftentimes it's said that we marry our mother. The traits we love about our mother, we look for, and you can go to a weird place with that, but there's a lot of very positive traits in my wife that I see in my mom, because she was my first picture of femininity, of what a woman should be. And a father is the first picture to daughters of what a man should be. And so they're trained by the actions of their father what a real man looks like and what to look for in a man. And so I wonder if, I don't know this for sure, but I wonder if some of that is there with Isaac, that he's looking for certain traits that maybe he saw in his own mother. Now, why do I bring this up? Because I think we need to know what we want in a relationship and pursue only that. To know what we want in a relationship and pursue only that. Because if you don't know what you're looking for, then it's like you're trying to hit a moving target. Then oftentimes what happens is we just date someone or marry someone because they're physically attractive. We're attracted to them physically, which that's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. You should be attracted to your significant other. And I don't think, just from what I've seen in history and even what the Bible says, because the Bible talks about how charm is deceptive, beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. That it's not that physical appearance is a bad thing. It's a moving target. You think what is considered beautiful in our society now is, the super skinny, size 0, which few women have that body type anyway. But you look back 100, 150 years, the pinnacle of beauty in our culture, even 100 years ago, man, they wanted women who had some childbearing hips. I mean, if you look at the ads and the things that were talked about, fairly large women were considered the picture of beauty, even 100 years ago. So we know physical appearance, it's a moving target. That's not what matters. What matters specifically is, am I attracted to this person, regardless of what they look like? Am I physically attracted? That is an important thing. But what other characteristics? That can't be it itself, because if that is the only thing, is I'm physically attracted to them, then you're going to end up marrying a very beautiful garbage fire of a person. And I know that because I dated a couple garbage fires of women, and I regretted it. You need to know what qualities you want. What type of person do I want to marry? You need to know what you want in a relationship and pursue only that. You need to decide for yourself with your community speaking into it, because we need wise counsel. What type of person do I want to marry? What do I want their character to be like? What do I want them to value? My mentor had given me some advice around just how to know if someone is of marriable quality, which if these two questions are a yes, it doesn't automatically mean you should marry them. It just means you could marry them. And the two questions that Tim Maxon would always tell me, these both need to be a yes for it to be a for them to be marriable quality. Number one, do we share the same worldview? And I already talked about that before. We've got to have the same worldview. We've got to view life, the purpose of life, value of human life, and the afterlife, and ultimate reality, all of those big picture worldview questions. We need to be on the same page with that. And it may not seem like that at first when we're dating and I have the rose-colored glasses and I can't see any of her flaws. I only see her, the good parts of her. But once we get married and we have kids, we are wanting to pass that worldview on to those children. And if our worldviews are drastically different, it's going to cause all sorts of problems in the relationship and a lot of confusion for those kids. So number one, do we share the same worldview? And then number two, do our life plans line up? Like, as in, if she's called to Africa and I'm called to live in the States, God may not be ordaining this marriage. Or sometimes what can be a very clear determinant is, does she want kids and I don't want kids? People don't talk about those questions, and then they blow up the relationship later because we realize, the most important questions in life, we never talked about it before we got married. And we should have, because they would have been blaring red signs that we shouldn't be together. And we could have avoided a lot of heartache had we done it. And so in this story, the servant knew what type of woman to look for in Isaac's wife. Someone who shared his worldview, someone who was a servant. She was willing to step out in faith and depart from what was normal, much like Sarah did with Abraham. Hey, we're going to go to this land. Where are we going? Oh, I don't know. When are we going? I don't know. Yeah, let's do it. Same thing with Rebecca. Hey, we're going back to this land you've never been to before. You're going to marry this guy you've never met. Are you cool with that? And she's like, yeah, let's do it. So she's willing to step out in faith. But it's the end of the story that I want to point out. I love the way the story ends. Verse 61, it says this. Then Rebekah and her attendants got ready and mounted the camels and went back with the man. So the servant took Rebekah and left. Now Isaac had come from Beer Lahai Roi, for he was living in the Negev. He went out to the field one evening to meditate. I love that. He's praying. Like when they're arriving, he's out in the field praying. And as he looked up, he saw camels approaching. Rebekah also looked up and saw Isaac. She got down from her camel and asked the servant, and I want to make sure I get the tone of this question right. Who's that man in the field coming out to meet us? Okay, maybe she didn't say it like that, but in my mind, I like to think she did. Who's that man coming out in the field to meet us? He's my master, the servant answered. So she realizes, that's the guy. So she took her veil and covered herself. Then the servant told Isaac, I love this sentence, then the servant told Isaac all he had done. So then Isaac got to hear the story. How cool would that to be just, saying, hey, I prayed this prayer, and literally I hadn't even finished the prayer, and she shows up. So cool. Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah. So she became his wife, and he loved her. And this is what made me ask that question before. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Because I think there was something there. I see some of my mother in this person, and that comforts me because I just lost her. Story ends in such a beautiful way, and Rebecca embarks on this journey to meet her new husband, and where does she find Isaac? Out praying. Women in the room who are dating right now, if you want to know where to go to find a good man, go to places where people are praying. Find someone who prays, who has a strong prayer life. Good place to start. Isaac wasn't wringing his hands, wondering, oh, is she going to like me? Is she going to be pretty? Are we going to get along? No, he's like, God, I can only receive what you give me. And so he's out in the field praying, trusting in God. And though it may seem like a small detail, I feel like it communicates something significant. He's not worried about finding a wife. He's focusing on what matters. He's focusing on his relationship with God. And when you focus on what matters most, God can give you what you desire most. It's funny how he works like that. And so this is my final advice to you who are in the dating world, whether you're new, just beginning to date, been dating for a while, maybe newly single again. Focus on becoming the right person, not on finding the right person. I heard a pastor say it like this: your job is to become who the person you're looking for is looking for. You have no control over what that person's going to be like, but you have all control over what you look like, how your character is, the type of person that you're becoming. Under the guidance and leading and transformation of the Holy Spirit, you can focus on becoming the person who you're looking for is looking for. And God's going to bring that right person at the right time, if it's his will. Because see, here's the thing I've learned about dating and marriage and all of that. It's not just about finding the right person, it's about becoming the right person. And so my prayer for all of those who are dating in this room is that you would understand that and entrust all of that to God. Because the truth is, I do not want you guys to become a statistic that we're going to laugh about someday in a sermon 20 years from now. I don't want you to arouse or awaken love until it so desires. I want you to fix your eyes on the only right person for you, which is Jesus. Will you stand with me?